To our amazing viewers at Midnight Affairs Tales, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know now. Let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. I was half asleep on the recliner, TV humming static, whiskey on the table untouched for once, when the ringtone buzzed, a sharp, alien noise slicing the night. Something inside me already knew. It was her, Emma. My daughter's voice trembled through the speaker like wind through a cracked window. "Dad," that's all she got out. Then came background noise, doors slamming, a man yelling something I couldn't make out. A scuffle, then silence. Click. I stared at the phone. No caller ID. No signal. Just silence. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. She'd moved out a year ago, wanted to figure life out in the city. She was stubborn like her mother. Brave, reckless, beautiful. That night rewired something in me. I wasn't just her father anymore. I became something else. Something I thought I'd buried after the wars. They say combat rewires you. Makes you dangerous, makes you empty. But nothing empties a man more than losing the only thing that ever kept him human. I grabbed the old duffel from under my bed. It still smelled like the jungle, blood, sweat, iron. Inside were tools not meant for this country. Gear that should have been left in places God forgot. But they still worked. Still fit. Muscle memory never fades. Neither does purpose. Next morning, I drove to her apartment. Door was unlocked. No sign of struggle, but no Emma either. Her laptop was gone. Clothes scattered like she'd left in a hurry, or had been made to. Her sketchbook lay open on the floor. A drawing of a man, faceless, but wearing a chain with a dagger emblem. I'd seen that emblem once. Northern Coast, 2009. Smugglers. Human traffickers. My hands clenched so tight they bled. There was no police report. No missing person entry. Just like she'd vanished off the grid. When I asked her building manager, he shrugged. She moved out. Some guy picked her up. Black car. Late night. What guy? He looked at me like I was asking about the weather. Tall. Shaved head. Tattoo behind his ear. The last word hit like a round to the chest. I asked him to repeat it. A snake. Coiled. I didn't say a word. I just walked away. The snake. I'd seen that tattoo before, crawling along the necks of men we used to put in body bags. A gang with roots in every dark trade imaginable. Drugs. Guns. Flesh. They operated in whispers. No names. No digital footprints. Only signs. Symbols. And my daughter had drawn one. I drove 3 cities over to visit someone I hadn't seen in 9 years. Mason. Retired black ops, now working as a mechanic. A man who owed me 3 lives. He opened the door and stared like he was seeing a ghost. "Jesus, Caleb. I thought you were done." I was. He saw the look in my eyes. Stepped aside without a word. Mason had a contact who ran deep intel. Off book, untraceable. We pulled favors, burned what bridges we had left. By nightfall, we had a name. A low-level runner. One of theirs. He went by Travis. Drove women across state lines. Liked to hang out in an old dive bar called Red Harbor, just off Route 9. Discreet. Dirty. I didn't wait. At 11:03 p.m., I walked through the door of Red Harbor. Smell of cigarettes and piss. Jukebox bleeding out a country song. I saw Travis at the bar, shaved head, snake behind the ear, fingers twitching like a man used to hiding. I took the stool next to him. He glanced my way. "You're not from around here." No, he smiled like a man too stupid to see his own funeral walking in. "You lost." "In a way," I said, sipping cheap bourbon. "Looking for my daughter." He laughed. "Aren't we all?" I waited. Let silence wrap around us like smoke. Then I asked, "You ever move a girl named Emma?" Brown hair. Sketchbook. Quiet voice. Scared eyes. He froze. Just enough to tell me the truth. I didn't give him a chance to run. My hand gripped his wrist under the bar, hard enough to make his knuckles crack. My voice was a whisper. "Where is she?" He tried to play dumb. Said she was probably fine. I whispered back, "Blink twice if you want to live." He blinked. Once. Twice. Then he talked. Fast. Said she was taken to a compound near the border. Said there's a man named Victor, the one who arranges the auctions. Said Emma was meant for the next shipment. I asked when. He said, tomorrow. I let go. And then I broke his nose. Left him there, bleeding into his whiskey. As I stepped outside, the night air felt colder than it should have. Tomorrow. One day. One chance. They had no idea who they'd just invited to the party. If you're into stories like this, full of emotion, drama, and revenge, you're in the right place. I've got plenty more coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. Just hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. Now back to the story. The sun hadn't risen yet, but I was already 20 miles out, driving a borrowed pickup through fog so thick it looked like spilled milk. The GPS glitched out once we hit dirt roads. That was a good sign. Places like the one I was heading to didn't show up on maps. Victor. The name played on loop in my head like a bad hymn. Travis hadn't said much, but he said enough. Victor was mid-level muscle with just enough brains to be dangerous. He coordinated deliveries, girls, mostly, across abandoned freight yards, isolated cabins, and old wartime bunkers turned into holding cells. The Snake Gang didn't rent buildings, they buried them. When I got to the site Travis mentioned, I parked half a mile out and walked the rest. No lights, no guards visible, just a corrugated steel shed camouflaged by overgrowth and silence. It looked like it hadn't seen visitors in a decade, but I could smell diesel and cold steel. I circled once. No tripwires, no signs, but the grass near the back entrance was flattened. Recently, someone had been here. I used a crowbar to pry the back lock open. The smell hit me first. Not rot. Bleach. Industrial. Like someone had cleaned up something they didn't want found. The inside was hollow, stripped floors, rusted shelves, but the center had drag marks, thin trails in the dust, and a plastic wristband lying in the corner. Emma's name. I picked it up, hands shaking for the first time. This was real. She'd been here. And she wasn't alone. There were 5 wristbands in total, each labeled with a name and a barcode, like they were items on a shelf, sold to the highest bidder. I checked the room's edges and found a bolted steel hatch in the floor, padlocked. I snapped it open with a pry bar and descended into darkness. The underground space was narrow, concrete walls sweating moisture, single bulbs swinging overhead. There were 5 cells, all empty, but the walls had marks. Fingernail scratches, desperation in jagged lines. One cell had something scrawled in chalk. He wears red shoes. I didn't know what it meant. Not yet. I opened a rusty locker in the corner. Inside were files, actual paper files. Someone had been sloppy. Inside were photos, notes, transaction sheets. All coded. But I recognized one thing. A manifest with Shipment 17 circled in red. 5 names. Emma's was 3rd. Destination, Crescent Point. My heart sank. Crescent Point wasn't a town. It was a myth. A name whispered in underground forums and black market message boards. A private island used by traffickers, torturers, and war criminals who wanted a place to indulge their worst instincts without consequence. And now, my daughter was heading there. There was only one way in. By water. I drove back to Mason's by sunrise. He was already awake. Hadn't slept. Neither had I. He read the manifest and looked up. You're not supposed to come back from places like Crescent. I'm not going there to come back, I told him. We made a list. Every man I needed to see before the crossing. Every favor I could still call in. One of them was in the city, an ex-FBI profiler named Daniel Shaw. He had a bad habit of helping ghosts like me. He also owed me a limb. When I met Daniel, he looked like hell. Long beard, skin like ash, but his mind, still sharp. He reviewed the files and muttered one name under his breath. Victor doesn't run Crescent, he said. He's just logistics. The real owner of Crescent is a man named Reed. No last name, just Reed. He doesn't show up in photos. He doesn't leave fingerprints. But he exists. Is Emma with him? I asked. Daniel looked me dead in the eye. If she is, you'll need more than bullets to bring her back. I left without another word. By nightfall, I was watching the dockyards. A convoy of trucks arrived under armed escort. I recognized Victor by the red shoes. The message in the cell came flooding back. He wears red shoes. I followed the convoy to a rusted cargo ship labeled the Seraph. No flag, no identification, just shadows moving aboard, shouting in broken languages. Then I saw her. Emma. Hair matted, lips bruised, eyes searching. But she was alive. They loaded her into the ship's hold with the others. One guard pushed her. She stumbled, caught herself. Still fire in her. I gripped my sidearm so tight I nearly crushed it. I had one shot, one ship, one crossing. I wasn't ready yet, but I would be. The Seraph was scheduled to leave in 24 hours. And I had a plan. I spent that night underground, not in some metaphorical sense. I mean literally. An old Cold War tunnel beneath the city, long since forgotten, accessed only through a broken sewer grate and a 12-digit code I hadn't used in a decade. Inside were weapons, tools, and blueprints. Things left behind from another life. A life I'd promised to bury the day Emma was born. But the war never really ends. It just waits, patiently. And tonight, it had found me again. I spread out everything I had on the table. Victor's movement patterns, the Seraph's blueprint from old shipping registries, satellite paths, weather data. My mind shifted into something cold, clinical, tactical. The Seraph had one known weak point, its radio tower. If I could disable it before launch, they'd be forced to dock for emergency repair. That would buy me time and a route in. But I needed access. And access required leverage. There was one man I could use. A harbor official named Miles Beck. Ex-Navy, dirty as hell, but not stupid. He handled off-the-books logistics for groups like the Snake Gang. But he'd also lost a daughter once. Drunk driver. He never got over it. I knew his type. I found him alone in a bar called Anchor's End, watching old war footage on mute. When I dropped Emma's wristband on the counter, he didn't touch it, just stared at it. "How many this time?" he asked. "5, I replied. "One of them's mine." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "Victor'll kill me if I help you. He won't get the chance." I left the sentence hanging. Miles drank the rest of his bourbon, then slid a keycard across the bar. "Tower access hatch is under the north dock. Green panel. You'll need a timer and a jamming pulse. I've got 5 minutes of blackout before they trigger backup systems. That's all I can give you." "It's enough," I said. That night, I waited for the crew to finish loading. At 3:12 a.m., I slipped onto the dock dressed as one of the maintenance techs. Radio in my ear. Cutter strapped to my back. Every second was calculated. Every breath, controlled. I reached the hatch, keyed in the override, and crawled into the ship's spinal corridor. Metal groaned beneath my feet. My heart was silent. The radio tower loomed above, blinking red like a heartbeat waiting to fail. I planted the jammer and wired it into the core. And then, I waited. At 3:18 a.m., the signal died. Lights flickered. Alarms buzzed. I disappeared into the smoke before anyone noticed the damage. By the time the ship's crew had realized what happened, I was already off the dock, hiding in the shadows of a dead alley. They wouldn't be leaving port tonight, and Emma had just earned another 12 hours of life. But Victor was smarter than I'd anticipated. He tightened security, doubled the guards, brought in outside contractors. One of them was Cole. I remembered Cole from a mission in Kandahar. Mercenary. No loyalties. A ghost with teeth. Last I heard, he was working private detail for cartels. And now, he was standing 10 feet from my daughter. That changed everything. I needed an inside man on the ship. Someone already embedded. That's when I remembered Elena. She wasn't a soldier. She was something far more dangerous. A smuggler turned informant. We'd worked together once, long ago. I saved her life when a buy went bad in Istanbul. She owed me. I found her at a rundown cyber cafe in the city, surrounded by monitors and misery. When she saw me, she didn't smile. Just lit a cigarette. "I thought you were dead," she said. "Not yet," I replied. "But they will be." She looked at the files. Looked at me. Then tap the screen. I can get you a transponder chip. Puts you on their crew manifest. Gives you 15 minutes aboard, tops. After that, if they check your ID, you're done. That's all I need. She paused. And what happens after you find her? I stared at the image of Emma. Hair tangled. Eyes hollow. Skin bruised. I bring her home. And I burn the ship. Elena didn't argue. She just nodded and whispered. Then let's light a match. 12 hours left. 12 hours until the Seraph tried to vanish again. This time, I'd vanish with it. And every man on board would know what it means to wake a soldier's wrath. The dockyard smelled different the next day. Less like salt and rust, more like blood waiting to dry. You could taste the tension in the air. The Seraph loomed larger now, its belly full of secrets and sins. I wore the uniform Elena provided. Rough canvas, security badge forged but convincing. The transponder chip she implanted under my skin pinged the access scanner with a quiet green blink. No questions. No hesitation. The disguise worked. For now, I stepped onto the ship with a steel lunchbox clutched in my gloved hand. Inside, not food, a silenced pistol, a folding blade, 2 adrenaline vials, and a tracking device with Emma's last ping. A digital whisper buried in static. Weak, but real. The corridors were narrow, lined with grime. The kind of place where sunlight was a rumor and screams echoed for days. Every step I took reminded me of Iraq. Those black sites no one admits exist. I passed 2 guards. They barely looked up. One wore the tattoo, the coiled snake behind the ear. That damn mark. It branded them all. I memorized his face. I'd be seeing him again. The lower decks were sealed. Only authorized handlers allowed. I had 13 minutes before the ID scrub would fail. I needed to find Emma. Fast. The tracker pulsed once. Then again. She was close. I turned a corner and found myself face to face with a camera. For a second, I froze. Then the light turned green. The override Elena uploaded had worked. One more ghost in the system. Then I saw the door. Heavy. Reinforced. Coded. 3 digits on the pad, blinking for input. I remembered what Daniel said. Crescent Point wasn't real unless you knew how to speak to ghosts. The passcode was always something symbolic. Ritualistic. I keyed in 317. Emma's birthday. Click. The door hissed open. The room was a cage. Metal bars. A bed bolted to the floor. Chains. A girl in the corner, eyes swollen shut. But it wasn't Emma. My heart dropped, but I moved to her anyway. She flinched at my presence. I'm not here to hurt you. I whispered. Where is Emma? The girl coughed blood. They moved her. Upstairs. To Victor. My blood went cold. Victor didn't just process victims. He sampled them. I left her with the knife. Told her where to run if she heard gunfire. I ran. Not quietly. Not this time. By the time I reached the second deck, I'd already taken out 2 guards. One went silently, the other, not so lucky. But I didn't care. Time was dead. And so was Victor. I found him in a room lined with mirrors and velvet. Like a lounge for a man with no soul. He was standing over Emma, who was unconscious. Arms limp, her sketchbook ripped and torn on the floor. Victor turned. Red shoes. Tattoo behind his ear. Same snake. He smiled when he saw me. I wondered when you'd show. I didn't speak. Didn't threaten. I just drew the pistol. He moved fast, too fast. Knocked the gun from my hand. We crashed into a table, then the wall. He was stronger than I remembered. Drugs, maybe. Or adrenaline. He laughed while we fought. She begged for you, old man. Called your name like a prayer. That's when I snapped. I drove my thumb into his eye. Hard. He screamed, staggered. Then I pulled the blade from my boot and sank it deep into his side. Twice. 3 times. Victor collapsed, breathing shallow. He looked at me with blood pooling from his lips. You think she's the only one? Then he died. I turned to Emma, still breathing, but barely. I lifted her in my arms. She didn't wake. I whispered, I'm here, baby. I got you. The ship alarm blared. Someone had found the bodies. We had minutes before the ship went into full lockdown. But I wasn't leaving yet. Victor said, "She's not the only one," which meant this wasn't over. I carried her through smoke, through gunfire, through chaos. And I left a grenade in Victor's velvet room. Let it burn. As I drove away, Emma still unconscious in the back seat. The reflection in the mirror showed me the snake tattoo behind the ear of the last man who tried to stop us. The symbol hadn't died with Victor. It was deeper, wider, and this war was just beginning. Emma didn't wake for the next 36 hours. I had set up in an old ranger's cabin deep in the pines, a location no GPS had touched since 1996. It was built for solitude, not comfort. But it had heat, a locked door, and a first aid kit with enough morphine to keep her from screaming when the fever hit. The infection wasn't from a wound. It was from exhaustion, psychological collapse. Her body was shutting down from the stress. Whatever Victor had done to her, or planned to, had left a scar deeper than flesh. I didn't sleep either. Just sat beside her, blade in hand, eyes on the shadows. Emma finally stirred on the second night. I saw her eyes twitch before they opened, and when they did, she gasped, panicked, kicking, trying to get away. "Emma," I said, gripping her wrist gently. "It's me. Dad. You're safe." She looked at me for a moment, like she didn't recognize my face. Then something broke inside her. She crumbled against my chest and sobbed like a child. I held her tighter than I'd ever held anything. For a while, there was no need for words. Eventually, she whispered, "They're not done." I didn't ask what she meant. I just let her talk. "There's a man, they called him Reed. He runs it all. Victor was just a buyer. Reed sets the auctions, the rules, the punishments." Her voice shook like the air had weight. "He watched from behind glass. Never spoke. Just watched." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Did he hurt you?" She didn't answer, which told me everything. I wanted to burn the world. But first, I needed names. One of the guards I'd taken down before escaping the Seraph had survived. I didn't kill him outright, not because I was feeling merciful. I wanted him conscious, talking. I drove to the storage unit where I tied him up. A folding chair, duct tape, one bullet in the chamber. Simple setup. He blinked when I ripped the hood off. Young, maybe 30, blonde, tattoos on his fingers, snake behind the ear. "You know what this is?" I asked, showing him Emma's wristband. He nodded slowly, eyes wide. "Then you understand what's going to happen if you don't talk." He tried to stay silent. Most of them do, until the first knuckle breaks. He screamed. "Name," I said calmly. "Jonas," he spat. "My name's Jonas." "Jonas," I repeated. "You worked under Victor?" He nodded fast. "And Reed?" He hesitated. Wrong move. The second knuckle snapped cleaner. He howled. Okay, listen. Reed's not a man. He's a myth. Nobody meets him unless you're in deep. Victor only spoke to a voice. Sat phone. Satellite encrypted. South America, we think. Somewhere with no extradition. Who else is in your circle? Jonas coughed blood. There's a man named Dalton. He handles routing and disposal. When a girl doesn't sell or resists too much, he makes them vanish. Last I heard, he was in Vermont. Cabin. He works out of an old hunting lodge. Runs girls through Canada. I grabbed a pen and jammed it between his broken fingers. "One more question," I whispered. "Do you remember her?" I held up Emma's drawing. He nodded. She tried to escape. Bit one of the buyers. Nearly blinded him. They beat her for that. But she never cried. I stared at him. "You ever lay a hand on her?" "No. God, no. I just handled transport, I swear." I looked down at him. Wrong answer. The chair tipped. He didn't scream again. I left the storage unit burning. Dalton was next. Emma was too weak to travel. Mason offered to watch her. No questions. He just nodded and told me to take care of it. I packed 2 sidearms, 3 burner phones, and enough ammo to outlast hell. The Vermont cabin took 5 hours to reach. The snow had started by the time I arrived. Everything was quiet. Still. But evil doesn't need noise. Dalton's truck was in the driveway, beat-up Ford, bed covered in a tarp. I waited until midnight, then moved in. No guards. No cameras. Too confident. The door wasn't locked. Inside smelled like sweat and bourbon. Deer heads lined the wall. And in the back, stairs to the basement. I went straight down. What I saw still wakes me up in the middle of the night. There were two girls. Young. Maybe 15. Chained. Drugged. Alive. Barely. Dalton was asleep in a recliner. Bottle in hand. Shirt stained with grease. No remorse on his face. I didn't shoot him. I slammed his head into the floor so hard he lost teeth. When he woke, he was in the same chair Jonas had died in. Only colder. Bloodier. You're going to tell me everything, I said. Dalton didn't play brave. He was a coward by nature. He spilled immediately. There's a drop next week. Crescent Point. Private jet. They're moving the next shipment through JFK under diplomatic credentials. My jaw clenched. Who's the diplomat? Man named Faulkner. Real name's fake. Blacklisted arms dealer from Serbia. Now he does girls. Has clearance from someone high up. Real high. How many more like Emma? Dalton looked down. Whispered dozens. Maybe more. I stared into his eyes. You get a choice, I said. Name or pain. He blinked. What? Give me Reed's real name. Or feel what every girl in your basement felt. He shook. Sweat rolled down his face. Finally, he said it. Reed is Morgan. First name unknown. Goes by Reed because that's what bends but doesn't break. I wrote it down. Then I let him feel what broken really meant. The two girls were airlifted out by Mason's contact. One of them clung to me before the chopper left. Asked if I was her father too. I couldn't answer. Now I had the next piece of the puzzle. Morgan, a.k.a. Reed. Diplomatic cover. Black flights. And a location, Crescent Point, real this time. I returned to the cabin and found Emma awake, staring out the window. Was it bad? She asked softly. Yes. She nodded. Good. Then she looked at me. I want to help. I didn't argue. Because war changes people. And Emma wasn't a girl anymore. She was the daughter of a man the world had forgotten, and she was ready to make them remember. There's a certain type of silence that only comes after hell, a stillness that doesn't feel peaceful, just empty, like the calm that settles in your bones after a firefight. That's the kind of silence we sat in. Emma on the porch, me on the step, knife in hand, sharpening it slowly, not because I needed it sharper, but because routine keeps rage from boiling over. She hadn't said much since Vermont, but she watched everything, heard everything, and in her silence, she absorbed more than most men ever would in their whole lives. She looked at me now. When do we leave? That was the moment I realized. She wasn't asking for protection anymore. She was asking for purpose. The flight list we pulled from Dalton's tablet showed two names that mattered. Faulkner, the fake diplomat, and a security chief listed only as Rook. Rook was familiar. He used to work black bag ops for private contractors in Somalia. Brutal. Efficient. A ghost with a signature. Always lit a cigarette after a kill, even when it gave away his position. That lighter, old, scratched, with a red skull engraved, was what earned him the nickname. Emma had drawn it once. In one of her notebooks they'd returned to her after the rescue. I hadn't noticed it then, but now I knew who'd been in her cell. And he wasn't just any enforcer. He was Reed's hammer. We needed to find him. Problem was, Rook wasn't listed anywhere public. But Faulkner? His alias was scheduled to arrive at a private airstrip outside D.C. 2 days. Midnight. Flight origin, unknown. That was our chance. If we could intercept the diplomat, we'd get access codes. And maybe, if we were lucky, Rook would be close. We moved fast. I had Mason set us up in a warehouse overlooking the landing zone. Emma stayed hidden inside the surveillance van. She insisted she be part of it. I gave her a headset, just her voice in my ear. She didn't tremble, didn't panic, just watched. At 12:14 a.m., the jet touched down. Sleek, expensive, empty except for one passenger. Faulkner, bald, scar on his chin, gold ring on every finger. Reeked of power and cowardice, a dangerous combo. He was met by 2 SUVs. That's when I saw him. Rook. Same as I remembered. Tactical gear. Cold stare. And that lighter, flicking once, twice, flame dancing like a wink from the devil. Emma's breath caught in my ear. That's him, she whispered. That's the one. I moved. I hit the rear SUV first, disabling the engine with a well-placed charge. Screams erupted. Rook spun, instinct already locking in. But I was already moving. By the time his weapon cleared leather, I'd tackled Faulkner to the ground, knife to his throat. Tell them to stand down, I growled. He hesitated. So I drew blood. He screamed. Stand down. Stand down. The guards froze. Rook didn't. He moved toward us, slow and steady, hand hovering over his sidearm. Easy, I said, dragging Faulkner back toward the shadows. One step closer, and your employer will be looking for a new passport. You don't want this fight, Rook said. His voice was like gravel soaked in whiskey. I'm already in it. Then I threw Faulkner into the back of the surveillance van and hit the gas. Rook opened fire. Bullets shattered the back glass. Emma ducked, screaming. I swerved, took the van off-road, tore through fencing until the tires hit gravel. We didn't stop until we were 20 miles out. Faulkner was unconscious. A knock to the head during the scuffle. When he woke, he was in the same chair the others had sat in, zip-tied, bleeding, confused. Do you know who I am? He asked. I don't care, I replied. Emma stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching, the faintest tremble in her jaw. I'm protected, he said. You hurt me, and governments come looking. I leaned in close. I'm not a government. He paled. What do you want? Codes. Clearance. Everything you use to move girls to Crescent Point. His lips tightened. Emma stepped forward. She held out a necklace, a cheap chain, plastic charm. You gave this to me. After the first night. Faulkner blinked. Recognition hit him like a slap. I didn't. You said I was special, Emma said coldly. Then you gave me that. Silence. I was 14. The room shrank. Oxygen vanished. Faulkner looked at me, desperation leaking from every pore. You don't want to do this. I punched him. Then again, and again, until blood ran from his teeth like ink. He coughed out the code. Aries 9 Delta. Elena confirmed it within hours. It was real. Access to the Crescent Point manifest. Rook's contract. Even Morgan's satellite call logs. He wasn't just a myth anymore. He was a destination. And he was waiting. Rook had vanished. After the firefight, he dropped from all known networks. But we had a lead. One call in the logs traced back to a warehouse in Louisiana, a known staging site for high-value shipments. Girls with high black market bounties. Emma was on that list once. She wasn't anymore. But someone else was. A girl named Chloe, 16. Red hair. Diabetic. Parents reported her missing 2 weeks ago. Same profile. Same trail. Same fate. If we didn't stop it. Emma looked at me that night as I loaded the guns. I want to pull the trigger this time. I didn't tell her no. Because deep down, I knew she had earned it. And monsters don't die easy. Sometimes, it takes the very thing they tried to destroy them. We were heading to Louisiana. And Rook was next. Louisiana was heat and rot. The kind of place where secrets didn't stay buried. They just sank deeper into the swamp until no one cared enough to pull them out. Emma sat beside me in the truck, hands tied in her lap. The girl who once hummed songs on car rides now stared out the window like she was memorizing the world, in case she had to disappear from it again. We'd tracked Rook to a backwoods motel 20 miles off the nearest paved road. No name, just a flickering neon sign. Stay a while. The irony wasn't lost on me. Elena fed us the signal ping from Rook's last burner. He'd spent 48 hours in room number 9. A surveillance drone had captured a blurry image of him entering, carrying a black duffel bag and a case marked with the Crescent Point seal, a trident inside a circle. We pulled up just after midnight. Crickets and silence. Emma gripped my sleeve. What if the girl's already gone? Then we find the next one, I said. And the one after that. She nodded. No fear in her now. Just fuel. I slipped my sidearm from the glove box and handed Emma a second pistol. Small, light, loaded. You still sure about this? She didn't answer with words. She just chambered around. We approached from the rear, cutting power to the rooms one by one through the maintenance shed. Shadows stretched long in the moonlight. I covered the windows while Emma checked the perimeter. When we reached room number 9, the air was thick, too quiet. I tapped the door once. No answer. Again. Nothing. Then I kicked it in. Rook wasn't there, but the smell of gasoline was. The room had been torched, not fully, just enough to destroy evidence. Papers charred, floor scorched, but one thing remained untouched on the bed. A lighter. Red skull. Scratched metal. Emma froze. That's it, she whispered. The duffel bag was still in the corner. Inside, clothes, burner phones, syringes, and a phone, still powered. Stupid mistake. Even predators slip up. I plugged it into our field decryptor. While it worked, I searched the room further. That's when I found Chloe, barely conscious, zip-tied in the bathtub, lips cracked, bruises lining her arms. Eyes too hollow for a girl who still wore braces. Emma was the one who cut her loose. The girl whimpered. He said I was going to a place where no one would ever find me. Emma didn't cry. She just hugged her, held her like someone who knew what it meant to be forgotten. We got Chloe out and into the truck. I gave her water, meds, and called Mason for extraction. But before we left, the decryptor pinged. One outgoing message from Rook. Just 3 words. Phase 2 confirmed. I stared at the screen. It meant read wasn't done. Crescent Point was evolving. I uploaded the coordinates from the phone. Last known location. A private airfield near Baton Rouge, used by former military contractors. Elena cross-checked the flight plans. There was a cargo plane scheduled to depart in 24 hours. No listed passengers, but the weight manifest matched 7 bodies. All female, ages ranging from 12 to 19. Emma's hands clenched the armrest until her knuckles turned white. We stop it, she said. We end it, I replied. I dropped Chloe at a medical safe house. Emma didn't want to leave her. I won't let her end up like me, she whispered. I placed a hand on her shoulder. She won't. Not on our watch. We spent the rest of the night preparing. Ammo. C4. Fake credentials. Entry suits from an old contact who owed me after Yemen. We were going in as flight marshals, or at least close enough to fake it until we could get close. The next day, the airfield buzzed with quiet energy. Private security. Unmarked vans. We blended in under the heat and noise. The plane was parked at Hangar B. The pilot was ex-military, stone-faced, forgettable. But the man standing at the cargo ramp? Rook. Alive. Armed. Watching. He lit his lighter once. Brief flicker. Then he disappeared into the hold. Emma's voice in my ear. I have eyes on him. He's heading to the cockpit. Wait for my signal, I said. I moved toward the rear, flashing my badge to the loadmaster. He didn't look twice. I stepped inside. The hold was cold. Metal benches. Cargo crates chained down. No signs of the girls. Just silence. Then I heard it. Faint tapping. Inside one of the crates. Emma saw it too, through the thermal feed. They're in there, she whispered. Sedated. I planted charges along the entry ramp and nodded. Then I moved. Cockpit. Fast. Quiet. I found Rook halfway up the stairs. He turned. Smiled. I was hoping it'd be you. I didn't speak. We fought. No guns. Just fists, elbows, knees. Old school brutality. He was stronger. I was angrier. He broke my nose. I shattered his kneecap. He reached for his sidearm. Emma fired from the stairwell. One shot. Through his shoulder. He dropped. Emma stood over him. The lighter rolled from his pocket. She stepped on it. You remember me now? Rook coughed blood. You're just another broken thing. Emma raised her gun. And fired. Twice. No hesitation. I didn't stop her. Some fires burn for a reason. We freed the girls. 8 of them. Drugged but alive. I called Elena. She rerouted the authorities. Made the bodies vanish. The crime scene dissolve. By morning, the girls were safe. And the plane? Burned. Ashes. Like the motel. Like everything Rook touched. But as we drove away, Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. Will this ever end? I looked at her, and I told the truth. No, because men like Reed didn't die in fires. They died in the dark, when the right name was whispered in the wrong place. And we were just getting started. The girls were safe. For now. But safe is a temporary word in this world. Like clean hands in a murder scene. An illusion, gone the moment someone turns on the light. We took a 2-day detour through Texas, using back roads, burner phones, and aliases Mason cooked up in a heartbeat. Emma was registered as Ellie Carter. I was Frank McBride. She joked once about how boring the name sounded. But there wasn't any laughter in her voice. Just fatigue. I noticed her hand never stopped shaking. The plane raid had changed her. Not just because she pulled the trigger, but because Rook had looked at her like she was still property. Now, she was starting to look at herself the same way. And I couldn't let that happen. We reached a safe house in a tiny desert town. Population 118, according to the bullet-ridden sign. 1 main street, 2 diners, a church, and a sheriff that hadn't seen action since the last time someone robbed the gas station. It was perfect, until I found the prayer card. It was waiting on the motel nightstand when we arrived, neatly placed. Pristine, white cardstock, a golden trident pressed into the center. Crescent point symbol. On the back, in handwritten ink. She is still his. My blood went cold. Emma was in the shower. I stepped outside, scanned the perimeter. No cars. No eyes. But I knew what this was. They had found us. And Reed was taunting us. It wasn't about the girls anymore. It was about her. Emma. She stepped out wrapped in a towel, her hair wet, her eyes tired. I didn't show her the card. Not yet. Instead, I told her we were leaving early. She didn't question it. She didn't question much anymore. That scared me. We took the desert roads northeast, toward a contact in Kansas who had once worked logistics for black site rendition operations. If anyone had old flight paths for Crescent Point's origin flights, it was him. His name was Mark Doyle, and he'd vanished 6 years ago after testifying against a military contractor accused of trafficking detainees. I found him working as a groundskeeper at an abandoned seminary. Said he liked it quiet. Said ghosts made better neighbors than men. When I told him why we were there, he lit a cigarette and shook his head. You're looking for Crescent? That place ain't real. It is, I said, handing him the card. He stared at the symbol. Paled. I've only seen that twice. Once in Somalia. Once in D.C. Both times, men died without a sound. He led us to a cellar beneath the chapel. Dust. Cobwebs. Crates filled with files the government thought had been destroyed. He pulled one marked K-Path, Argus extracts. Inside were photos, names, locations, and one satellite map with a flight path traced in red ink, from South America to the Caribbean, then to open ocean, then gone. 30 minutes of radar blackout, Doyle said. Private tech. They use a refitted oil rig as a mobile terminal. Every 3 days, it moves 20 miles in any direction. You can't find it unless you're invited. How do we get invited? Emma asked. Doyle stared at her. You don't. You're cargo or your crew. She looked at me. I know how to be cargo. My chest tightened. No, I said. It's the only way. We'll find another route. There's no other way. We argued for an hour. Then another. But she was right. As much as it killed me, she had been there. She knew how they moved, what they looked for, and she still carried the brand they left on her shoulder, a crescent scar that made her eligible for reentry. Emma would go in posing as a high-value reshipment. Elena would falsify the order. I'd follow on a separate boat, ex-military, modified with stealth panels. Once she was inside, she'd activate a beacon hidden in a ring I gave her. Once it lit, I'd come. And this time, I wasn't leaving anyone alive. We had 48 hours to prep. Mason handled the tech. Elena set the drop with encrypted credentials. Doyle linked us to a Cuban smuggler named Luis, who ran silent freighters through unmapped Caribbean routes. All the while, Emma trained. Hard. Gun drills. Escape tactics. Mental conditioning. She broke twice. Cried once. But every time, she got back up. I'm not a victim anymore, she told me on the last night. I believed her. But I still hated this plan. The drop was set at 3 a.m. A black van. A crate reinforced with carbon steel. She climbed inside. I closed the lid. I watched it drive off. And for the first time in my life, I felt powerless. On the ocean, silence has a different texture. It hums beneath you. A pulse. A warning. Louise piloted the boat in near blackout. No lights. No engine noise beyond a gentle churn. I held the satellite pad in my lap, watching the beacon pulse. It didn't blink for hours. Then, at 7:42 p.m., it lit up. Crescent Point had accepted her. We were in range. The rig rose from the horizon like a steel tomb. No flags. No names. Just walls. And on those walls, bodies, hung as warnings. Some still moved. I gripped my rifle. Checked the breacher pack. Emma was inside. And Reed was waiting. I leaned into the mic and whispered to myself. Almost home, kid. The rig was a monster. A cathedral of rusted steel, stretching hundreds of feet above the ocean's surface, wrapped in floodlights and silence. Not a ship. Not a base. A kingdom built by shadows, ruled by something worse than men. Reed. Crescent Point wasn't just a place. It was his domain. And Emma was inside. The beacon blinked every 15 seconds from her ring, strong, steady. She was alive. She hadn't cracked. She hadn't been caught. Not yet. Louise slowed the boat 2 kilometers out. Any closer, and we'd be pinged by the rig's drone patrols. I suited up. Wetsuit, flippers, rebreather mask. Gear pack latched to my back. Weighed just enough to sink beneath sonar. I didn't speak to Louise before I dove. There was nothing left to say. The water swallowed me whole. 30 minutes of silence. No light. No sound but the rumble of generators overhead. I surfaced under the blind spot of a corroded service ladder, scraping barnacles off my knuckles as I climbed. I breached the rig from the underbelly. Inside, it was worse than I imagined. Cold corridors. Chain-linked pens. Cameras in every corner. Stale blood in the air. The scent didn't fade, it layered, like it had soaked into the metal. I crept past 2 guards in balaclavas, both armed, both lazy. I slit the first one's throat in silence. The second, I let run. He'd alert someone. I wanted Reed to know I was here. I wanted him to feel it. I moved toward the beacon. It pulsed from the north tower, isolation wing. VIP holding. Likely where they kept their prime inventory. I passed a room full of monitors, faces of girls, boys, each tagged, tracked, priced. I saw Chloe's photo flash for a moment. Then I saw Emma. Her profile had been updated. Returned asset. Condition, compliant. Status, scheduled for auction. I burned the monitor with a single shot. 2 guards rounded the corner. I didn't wait. Dropped one with a headshot. Took the other down with the butt of my rifle. They weren't trained. They were thugs. Dogs pretending to be wolves. The stairwell to the isolation wing was locked with retinal scan. I dragged one of the corpses back and used his eye to gain access. And there she was. Emma. Standing behind reinforced glass. Straight-backed. Calm. Dressed in the same gown they'd forced her into last time. But her eyes were different. Not scared. Focused. She didn't flinch when I entered. She just said, "He knows." "Reed?" She nodded. "He's in the central chamber. Watching everything. He wants you to come." That was the trap. And I walked straight into it. Central chamber was 5 floors up, once an oil processor, now converted into a private arena. Cameras on every angle. A single throne made of cables and rusted blades. And on it, Reed. He was older than I expected. Late 50s. Clean-shaven. White suit. Calm. "Caleb," he said, smiling. "You've made quite the mess." I didn't speak. He stood. "You've killed 27 of my men. Disrupted 5 shipments. Cost me over $70 million. I should be furious." I raised my gun. He didn't flinch. "But I'm not," he said. "I'm intrigued. You're what we call A correction. The thing that comes to rebalance the system. He motioned behind him. 2 doors opened. Guards shoved Emma inside. Chained. Knees bloodied. But unbroken. Reed stepped forward. I don't need her anymore, he said. She's tainted. But you? You're a relic, Caleb. And relics deserve to be preserved. I knew what this was. He wanted a deal. Walk away, he said. Take her. Leave the others. They won't remember you in a month. New girls come in every week. This place runs without names. I stared at Emma. She shook her head. No. So I shot Reed in the leg. He dropped, screaming. Guards opened fire. I dove behind the console, bullets shredding wires. Alarms blared. Chaos erupted. Emma kicked one of the guards in the throat, grabbed his weapon, took down another. I reached her, untied her chains. Run. She smirked. No. Burn. We fought side by side through the halls. Bullets. Blood. Screams. We set charges in the engine room, the server farm, the slave pens. One by one. I made sure Reed saw every flame ignite. When the rig started to collapse, I dragged him to the edge of the platform. You'll never stop this, he gasped. I nodded. But you won't see what comes next. And I dropped him. No words. No honor. Just gravity. We escaped by the secondary raft deck. Luis pulled us in, speechless. We watched Crescent Point burn from the open sea. And in the flicker of that fire, I saw Emma cry. For the first time, not from fear, but release. Freedom had a shape now. A flame. But war leaves smoke. And I knew it wasn't over. Because one last file on Reed's system hadn't been deleted. One name remained. Morgan. The architect behind Reed. The one who funded it all. And Emma had seen him once. Briefly. Just a silhouette. A man with a black cane. And a scar across his mouth. We had one final trail. And one final mission. Because justice wasn't finished. And Emma wasn't done surviving. Freedom is a strange thing. You fight for it like breath underwater. Then you get it. And for a moment, you're weightless. But the scars don't let you float for long. Emma was quiet again. We sat in a motel just outside Havana, the glow of Crescent Point still haunting the edges of her eyes. I watched her trace her fingers over the scar on her shoulder, the Crescent brand. They didn't just brand me, she said. They numbered me. I was 47C. I didn't ask how many there had been before her. She already knew. But what she didn't know, what we both didn't know, was that Reed wasn't the top of the chain. He was just the butcher. The name on the last file? Morgan. Code name. Grey Room. We didn't know his face. Only his symbol, a black cane carved from ivory. Always seen in silhouette during the auctions. Reed answered to him. So did Rook. So did Faulkner. Morgan was the architect of the entire system. Emma said she saw him once. Tall, sharp, dressed like he belonged in some forgotten corner of old European power. Scar running from his lip to his jawline. Didn't speak. Just watched. Cold eyes. Colder than Reed's. We had one clue. A name scribbled in a ledger from Crescent Point's mainframe. Edmund Lang. Lang was the shell CEO of a company called Viridian Group, a private banking entity based in Switzerland. But Emma remembered that name too. They used Viridian to pay for the drugs, she said. All the shipments. Medical gear. Everything. Lang was a ghost, but Elena had contacts in Geneva. Within 2 hours, we had a location. Lang was attending a private gallery in Berlin. Invitation only, hosted by something called the Curated Table, an underground auction house for high-value culture. But we both knew what that meant. Not paintings. People. Lang would be there. And maybe, just maybe, Morgan would be too. Emma didn't hesitate. I want to see his eyes. We flew under aliases. Her as my assistant. Me as a collector with deep pockets. Elena forged the dossiers. Mason provided burner passports that wouldn't survive customs twice. The gallery was inside an abandoned cathedral. Gothic. Red-lit. Velvet curtains and champagne. And the kind of silence that always precedes evil. Lang stood near the altar. Sharp suit. Gray beard. Cold smile. I approached him slowly. Beautiful place, I said. He didn't look at me. Pain often hides in beauty. That's what makes it profitable. He sipped wine, then finally turned. You're not a collector. I smiled. And you're not a CEO. Emma moved through the crowd like smoke, disappearing into the backstage corridors. Her calm buzzed in my ear. I'm in the back office. Files, lots of them. Coded manifests. I think this place is a front. Lang caught the look in my eye. Reached for his pocket. I snapped his wrist before he could pull the alarm. We dragged him into the confession booth. He screamed once before the silencer stopped him. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. He was bleeding from the mouth when I pressed the knife against his throat. Where's Morgan? I don't know. Wrong answer. Emma stepped in, holding a folder. She tossed it on his lap. You sent these, she said. You scheduled the shipments. You approved the disposal files. You know him. Lang spat blood. I never met him. I pressed the blade deeper. Last chance. He wheezed. All I know, he's in Black Hollow. Emma's eyes narrowed. What is that? Lang coughed. It's not a place. It's a level. Only the elite get there. Morgan runs it from the inside. Beyond Crescent. Beyond the auctions. Real power. Governments. Contracts. They say he lives off the grid. On an island. Private. No name. No lights. You get invited or you don't go. I asked the last question. Why? Lang blinked. Why what? Why do this? He looked at me like I was the one asking the wrong question. Because people pay for the darkness, he said. And we sell it. I put a bullet in his head. No sermon. No regret. He was a virus. I don't regret killing viruses. Emma didn't flinch. She looked at the folder again. There's a schedule. One more shipment. High profile. Ultra private. They're calling it the Ascension. Departure from Gibraltar. Final destination, unknown. But the encryption leads back to a subnetwork called Black Hollow. This was it. The last gate. The last devil. And he had a name now. Morgan. We packed everything. Wiped the gallery's cameras. Left no trace. But that night, in the motel, Emma sat on the bed with her hands pressed to her chest. I thought I was alone, she said. But there's so many more. Girls like me. Boys too. Buried in files. Just numbers. I nodded. And we'll burn every file. Every room. Until none of them are just numbers anymore. She looked up at me. Eyes steady. I don't want justice anymore. I knew what was coming. I want him. We'll find him. She reached into her pocket. Pulled out the lighter she took from Rook. She flicked it once. Watched the flame. Then let's finish this. Because she wasn't the only one. And Morgan was about to learn what happens when survivors stop running and start hunting. Gibraltar was a lie. The shipment never departed. The ship we expected to intercept, the Helix, was a decoy. Empty. Abandoned. Left in the open like bait. Whoever Morgan was, he'd anticipated us. He was 3 moves ahead. We were getting too close. But it wasn't a loss. Not entirely. Because inside the captain's quarters, taped under a rusted drawer, was a photograph. A house. Log-built. Surrounded by trees so thick they swallowed the sky. And scribbled on the back, in Reed's handwriting, Final Protocol. Morgan. Black Hollow. We had a location. West Virginia. Emma traced the photo with her fingers like it was sacred. That's where it ends. We didn't speak during the flight back. The weight was too much. We'd burned through the entire chain. Faulkner, Rook, Victor, Lang. We'd exposed auctions, intercepted shipments, freed the damned. But none of it would matter if Morgan stayed breathing. Because he wasn't just the last name. He was the idea. And ideas only die when you erase them from memory. We drove through the Appalachians for 6 hours before the roads disappeared. Then another 2 through unpaved trails, silence pressing against the windshield like fog. Finally, we found it. The house. No gate. No security cameras. No visible guards. But nothing about it felt safe. It sat at the edge of a frozen lake, sunken into the earth like it had been waiting there for centuries. Lights glowed behind blackout curtains. Smoke curled from the chimney. Peaceful. Ordinary. Emma's voice cut through the silence. Does it feel wrong? Everything about it, I said. We waited until dusk. Then moved in. The perimeter was clean, too clean. Not a single tripwire, motion sensor, or infrared trap. It was either arrogance or something worse. We entered from the back. The door creaked like it hadn't been used in years. The inside was warm. Firewood stacked neatly. Antique furniture. Books on every surface. And silence. No Morgan. No guards. Just a man sitting by the fire. Reading. He didn't turn as we approached. Didn't even flinch when I leveled the gun at the back of his skull. "I've been expecting you," he said. His voice wasn't cruel. It was calm. Measured. I walked around slowly, keeping the gun up. He was in his 60s, maybe 70s. Hair white. Face pale. And across his mouth, a scar like a knife had tried to silence him once and failed. "Morgan." Emma stepped forward. He looked up at her. Eyes soft. Like he was seeing a ghost. "You were my finest work," he said. She pulled her gun. "I'm your ending." But he didn't move. Didn't plead. Just closed the book and set it down. "I built something that cannot die," he said. "Even if you kill me, there are others. The system regenerates. Rebrands. You think because you set fire to a few ships and shot a few men, you've changed anything?" Emma's hand shook. He smiled. "I gave the world what it already wanted. I didn't create demand. I just organized it." I stepped forward, rage boiling. But Emma stopped me. "No," she said. "I want this." She sat in front of him, face to face. "You stole me. Broke me. Sold me." He nodded. "You are what comes after," he said. "The proof that pain can be shaped into fire." "You think that's noble?" she whispered. "I think it's inevitable." She leaned in closer. "And I think you're afraid." Then she pulled the trigger. One shot. Right through the mouth. He collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been cut. But it wasn't over. Because behind the fireplace was a door. A steel vault. We cracked it open with C4. Inside hell. Files. Names. Locations. Proof. Decades of it. Not just girls. Governments. Diplomats. Celebrities. All complicit. All documented. Morgan didn't just run the trade. He kept records. Insurance. Blackmail. A kill switch for the world. Emma stared at it all. "If we release this, they'll all burn." "Yes," I said. "But so will we." She hesitated. Then picked up the first folder. "I'm not afraid anymore." We took it all. Digital and hard copy. Backed up and scattered across dead drops. Enough to spark 10 revolutions. We burned the house before sunrise. Ashes. No survivors. No name left to carve into the dirt. Only silence. And freedom. But as we drove away, Emma asked, "What if someone rebuilds it?" I looked at her and said the only thing I could. "Then we'll be waiting." Because the war wasn't over. But we were no longer the hunted. We were the fire. And every house built like Morgan's would burn. 3 weeks passed. We lived in motion. No fixed addresses, no trails, no real names. Emma dyed her hair. I grew a beard. Not because we were running, but because we had to let the world cool down after what we'd done. The files we released hit like a nuke. Governments collapsed. Private firms folded overnight. Names that had once sat safely behind layers of wealth and anonymity were suddenly hunted by international courts, whistleblowers, and angry mobs who realized their children had been collateral damage. Some of the people listed killed themselves within hours of the leaks. Others vanished. But one name didn't appear in any file. One final name. William Brax. A philanthropist. A tech mogul. A man who ran charities for rescued youth across Europe and Southeast Asia. He wasn't in Morgan's files. No contracts. No photos. But Emma recognized him. Not his face. His voice. "I heard him," she said one night, as we sat in a safe house in Prague. The day they brought me back. He was talking to Morgan over a speaker. He asked about the ascension. Called me a bridge. Said I was the first of something bigger. We traced him. Brax had gone completely dark after the leak. No public appearances. His company's locked down. His board stepped away. But Elena picked up traces, flight paths, asset rerouting, shell corporations forming in Iceland, Canada, New Zealand. But none of them stuck. Then Mason found it. A satellite image from Alaska, deep inland. near the edge of the Yukon. A private structure. Isolated. Heavily encrypted signal traffic. We knew. It was him. The last one. We took no allies. No backup. No plans for retreat. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was an execution. Emma didn't pack light this time. She carried a silenced pistol, a knife, a data spike with enough malware to erase a man's digital identity forever, and the same ring with the beacon, modified now to emit a wide-range jamming signal. We hiked 2 days through snow and silence. Then we found it. A compound. High-tech. Clean. Surrounded by cameras, drones, trip sensors, but nothing human. It was all automated. No guards. No guns. Just a gate. And a single path leading inside. Trap? I asked. Emma nodded. Doesn't matter. We entered. No alarms. The front door opened automatically. And Brax was waiting. He looked nothing like the predator we expected. Gray beard. Cardigan. Thick glasses. Standing in a massive room filled with computer screens, soft classical music humming in the background. He smiled when he saw Emma. I was hoping you'd come. She didn't raise the gun. Not yet. You knew? I hoped. You're the culmination of years of strategy. The first to break through. I'm not your project, she said. On the contrary, he replied. You're my legacy. I stepped forward. Enough. This ends tonight. Brax looked at me. I'm not like Morgan. Or Reed. I don't enjoy the darkness. I simply understand it. I organize it. You sold people. I evolved the system. Made it cleaner. Quieter. Sustainable. Emma drew the pistol. He didn't flinch. You kill me, he said. The rest of the structure collapses. Good, she said. You kill me, he added, and you lose the blueprint. The map to every node, every buyer, every victim still out there. I have it all. Right here. He tapped a drive on the table. I haven't shared it. Not yet. But I will. If you let me walk. Emma looked at me. I could see the storm behind her eyes. But I said nothing. This was her moment. She walked to the table. Took the drive. Smashed it under her boot. Brax paled. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she said. And shot him. Twice. Once in the leg. Once in the mouth. He collapsed, screaming. But she didn't look at him. She looked at the server bank. I walked over. Plugged in the spike. Data extraction in 5 minutes, the voice said. Emma watched the man bleed on the floor. You wanted me to be the bridge, she said. Now I am. The data poured into the spike. Names. Places. Codes. All of it. Everything Brax had tried to use as leverage became the weapon that would destroy his world. When it was done, I grabbed Emma's hand. We stepped outside as the building began to melt in fire. No drones came. No soldiers. Just snow. And silence. A fitting end. We watched it burn. The final name on the list. The last link in the chain. Gone. As we drove away through the endless white, Emma looked out the window. What now? She asked. I thought about it. Then said, we don't run anymore. She nodded. Then flicked Rook's old lighter one last time. And dropped it into the snow. We didn't need fire anymore. We'd become it.